You're listening to My Inner Teacher with Peter Starius and Crystal Ariel. The answers you seek are within you.
Welcome, James. This opportunity to have a conversation with you, like on a non-personal level, in a way, non-friendship level, and to just talk to you about your journey. And I think that listeners here, a lot of them may be unfamiliar with Ayurveda, and so I would like, personally, if I was going to coach you how to present yourself, I would love to hear this history that I've heard a little bit, but not in detail, about you being third generation, wellness, that your parents were doctors, or, I want to hear that whole story. And then
Me too.
how you kind of like went into a different direction with, let's say, Western medicine in a way, and into this new or old um,
Right.
healing system.
Well, thank you, Peter and Crystal. Thank you for having me. It's not just a pleasure, but really an honor to hang out with you guys. And I've seen some of your other podcasts, and I'm like, wow, it's a joy to be put up against any of those people. I'm humbled. But so to jump in, I am an Ayurvedic doctor. I'm also a doctor of Chinese medicine, TCM, third generation physician, you could call that. My father's, it's definitely in my father's lineage. My father's father was a chiropractor and a midwife back in Oklahoma back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, at a time when it was really difficult to find a doctor, very rural kind of small town situation. So he, did a lot for the locals as best he could given his training. And my dad, by the time he was a young man, he took his father's sort of flame, so to speak, and went to medical schools. They were, he went to UCLA, he went to University of Oklahoma. So, he definitely took his father's passion and took it up to another level in terms of, modern medicine, Western medicine, and all that. My father is still alive. He's 91, an otolaryngologist, or ear, nose, and throat doctor. And he really is one of the most well-known of any ENT that's out there, because he wrote all the books that all the ENTs use when they train. So if I go into any ENT's office and, say I need a hearing check or something, which I don't very often, but I say, hey, I'm the son of Byron Bailey, they're like, oh my God, he's like a god. So this guy is like incredibly huge in his field. And so I was going to follow that path as well, but some things happened along the way. I did all my pre-med work at the University of Texas in Austin, got, good grades and was ready to go to med school. But at the time, I wanted to study and practice international or tropical medicine. So instead of going straight into medical school, I moved to California, to LA, went in to study at infectious disease epidemiology at UCLA, because parasites was where I was all going, studying malaria and all the other kind of tropical diseases, and finished that master's. Met my first wife, and then she wanted to do an education abroad program for a year in Africa, right as I was finishing my master's. So instead of going straight into medical school, I thought, okay, I'll take a year off. I'll take a gap year. I'll get a job as an epidemiologist. And I did. I found a job with Jimmy Carter, with the Carter Presidential Center, his guinea worm eradication project, which was a worldwide eradication project. And the teachers that I had at UCLA were like, Mark Seams and Dave Newberry. These were the people that eradicated smallpox, like famous epidemiologists. So I took the job. I went to Ghana with her, and we lived in just outside of Accra, the capital city, and she went to school at the University of Ghana. And I was running all around Africa, all around Ghana, kind of like doing the epidemiology thing, collecting data and, looking for ways to intervene in this guinea worm kind of infection that was all over the world at the time. In fact, it's almost eradicated right now. So, but while I was there, I picked up malaria. I got sick with malaria and spent 2 or 3 days in bed with fever and chills and, exhausted, delirious. And on the weekends, I was studying an African musical instrument called the balafon, which is like a xylophone. It's like little wooden strips that you hit with a little mallet, and then they have gourds underneath them to give them a resonance. And when I didn't show up for my teacher, my class with this traditional African balafon instructor, he walked to my place. It was about a 5-mile walk to check on me, which was amazingly sweet. I mean, so kind. And then he saw that I was sick. He walked back to his place, walked back again with a bundle of herbs and a balafon on his back. And he put me in this quiet room on a cot. And then he made a tea from these herbs that were used to treat malaria. And then I drank the tea. It was very bitter. And then I laid down and he played this rhythm called the malaria rhythm. It's been used for thousands of years to treat malaria. It was a vibrational medicine system using music and herbs, and they were interacting with each other in me. And within half an hour, I fell asleep or went into some type of a trance. I don't know. But when I woke up in the morning, the malaria was completely gone.
No way.
So, I mean, I was a little tired, but like the fever and chills were gone. It was not looking good until he showed up. So that was a big awakening for me. This was 1988, and I hadn't really been exposed to natural medicines or herbal medicines at that time. I was still running with my dad's sort of Western medical model. And and then a year later, my first wife and I ended up going to India to live for a year. So we did 2 years abroad back to back. And in India, I picked up a lot of parasites from eating street food and found an Ayurvedic doctor in a village. I rode a bike like at 3 a.m. because I was, having dysentery and bloody stools. It was a mess. And this person said, there's an Ayurvedic doctor 2 villages over. So he gave me his bike, and I rode this bike barely and saw this Ayurvedic doctor, and they gave me these herbs. And then when I came back to where I was staying, this was in South India near Auroville, in Pondicherry. I made the tea with these herbs, and the dysentery stopped, the diarrhea stopped, the whole bleeding stopped. And I thought, oh my God, that's twice now I've been remedied by traditional natural medicines, like in their natural habitat, not like here with some Chinese medical school or some holistic person who's got a big following. These are just nobody local physicians, doing their thousands of year old thing. A few months later, I had some other issues. I was studying with the Dalai Lama up in Dharamsala, and I went to see this Tibetan medical doctor who was a Tibetan monk, short little white hair, probably 70 years old, and he read my pulse for about 25 minutes. I'd never seen that before. He couldn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Tibetan. And within 20 minutes, he knew exactly what was going on with me, just from reading my book. I'd never seen that before. So he gave me a little bundle of herbs. I went back to my little guest house, cooked up those herbs, and everything got better. So, a few months later, I'm back home in LA, and I'm thinking, I don't think I want to go to medical school. I think this really has changed the direction of my life. I want to dedicate my life to this, whatever this sort of new natural approach to wellness and what it is. A year later, I enrolled in an acupuncture program and got licensed because, my dad, I wanted to be licensed. Didn't want to just jump into Ayurveda is not licensed, by the way. It's a certification system, but acupuncture is a licensed system. So I got that first, and then went back to study Ayurveda. So that's sort of the beginnings of it all, and how I went from a Western model to more of a naturopathic or an Eastern model. It was really just from being in the world.
Excuse me while I pick my chin up from the floor. Wow,
James,
that was amazing.
What was it like when after you got certified in acupuncture and maybe even with a little training in Ayurveda, when you'd come home for Christmas, was your dad curious at all about what you were doing?
Yeah, I think he was very curious, but he didn't have the language to speak to it or even know what questions to ask. So I would say that it has definitely I mean, we share a common thread of caring about people and wanting to heal and help people. Although I chose a totally different direction, a different path to get there. And so that we share in common, but the actual mechanisms or the actual paradigm through which we do it, it's a little harder for him to kind of have a conversation about it. You know, I can meet him where he is, but he can't really meet me where I am in that way. But there's respect for it, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's curious to me. Like, I remember the first time I was going to India. I don't know if you've heard this story before. I know Crystal hasn't heard it. The first time I'm going to India was after I lived in New Zealand for 8 years, which already my parents were kind of missing me and kind of looking forward to me coming back to the United States because I told them that I made the decision to leave New Zealand.
Yeah.
But to after 8 years in New Zealand, I had all this stuff, and so I just wanted to kind of take it back to the U.S., drop it off, and then head to India. So they take me to the airport in Fresno for the first leg of my flight to India. At the curbside, my mom is just like crying her eyes out. And it's like, Mom, come on. I've been traveling. I'm 26, 27 years old. I've been traveling a lot internationally. What's going on? And she looks at me, James, and she goes, you're going to India and you're going to die. Because she'd seen all these,
My God.
60-minute stories on plagues and diseases in India and blah, blah, blah. And it was just that kind of, I don't think my parents ever really understood what would motivate me to do yoga or go to India. And, it wasn't a conversation that we talked about really ever. They weren't curious at all until my father, when he was in his 70s, he got diagnosed with a herniated disc, and the decision to operate was made. And I said, Dad, are you sure you really want to have that surgery? He said, well, what did they tell you? And he gave me this, what they told him. And it was very similar to my situation when I broke my back. And I said, well, are you in any pain right now? And he said, no, not so bad. And I said, well, why don't I give you a few things to try and then see if you're feeling better? And so one of them was just simply hanging from a pull-up bar and just letting your pelvis create a little traction for your spine. And then at the time, this company was making these padded backbender benches. It looked like a massage table, only it was bent like a semicircle. And I bought, it was like $500. I said, Dad, use this for a little bit and then just postpone the surgery and let the doctor kind of just like wait and give you a couple months to recover. So sure enough, after the couple months, they took the images and the disc was fine. Everything was good. And it was just from that moment on, my father was like, oh, this yoga thing, maybe there's some value in it,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, I was just curious because I wanted to hear it from you, how that was like if you kind of deviating from the norm.
Well, I absolutely deviated from the norm. And like a lot of families, my family doesn't fully understand what I do and how I do it. And so when I go home for the holidays and stuff, we just talk about what's going on with them,
Right.
or I'll talk about my kids, or we talk about life and, the world. We don't really talk about my career so much.
Right.
I think it's just about not having, like, I don't really talk about my brother's work either because it's all like environmental policy. I wouldn't even know what to ask him besides, what do you do? And what's going on lately? I can't talk to policy people because it's just a different kind of world, it's a different
For
language.
sure.
I think they struggle with that, but they respect what I do.
So yeah, on the topic of India, you both just got back from India, and I'd love to know more about how you got into this journey through the sacred sites and how that has to do with healing and helping people find their own way to healing.
Oh, how did I get into it? Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, I traveled to Africa for a year and India for a year with my first wife. She's a yoga teacher. It didn't take too long before we wanted to share that with other people. So from And we did a lot of retreats during the 90s to like places like Costa Rica and Indonesia and, and, you know, Mexico, but in 2001, I think it was, 2001, we were on our way down to the Maldives to shoot her first yoga video. Yeah, it was really nice. And we had a 24-hour layover in South India in Trivandrum, near the very southern tip of India, at this Ayurveda retreat center called Somathiram, and recommended on a whim from a friend. And we stayed there for 24 hours, and we got 2 hours of Ayurvedic treatments and ate Ayurvedically prepared foods, and had a really beautiful cottage. And the Ayurvedic doctors were fantastic. And we were like, oh my God, we have to come back here, and we have to bring people here. So the following year, we organized it, and we had 85 people join us for a week in Kerala, in southern India. And it was so successful, we ended up doing twice a year, 2 times a year, New Year's and summer or August, for about 4 or 5 years. And then we stopped doing the summer one, and we just did once a year for a few more years. And then she and I divorced, and a few years later, I picked it up and started doing my own. And mine are a little different. They're 5 days down at the Ayurveda Center, and then 7 days of traveling up north to places like Varanasi and Jaipur, Jodhpur, Kathmandu, places like that. It changes all the time.
Yeah. Peter, you said you felt amazing coming back
Yeah,
from
I
that
mean,
trip.
so I think it'd be a nice opportunity to share what happened to me. I I'd up until then I'd been to India 9 times, and my trip this just a couple months ago was with James, was my 10th time. And in all those times previous, which hadn't been for, I think it's been 20 years since I'd been back to India, they were pretty low budget experiences, like backpacking, kind of get there, take the trains everywhere, don't fly anywhere, and 17-hour train rides, and being in a second class or third class unreserved seat, it's quite a cultural experience, and not without its challenges, but also an incredible beauty in those types of experiences. This trip was different. This trip was well crafted. From James has been going for how many, since 20 years or 25 years, I can't even remember. So all the kind of potential flaws, or not flaws, potential problems with travel in India are removed. So there's a certain level of stress that I've never experienced. Lack of stress that I've never experienced in India. Plus, he's got relationships with people on the ground there, Indian people that have just lovely connections to the place and the history and the spiritual. It's part of their culture, this spiritual life. And so all of that for me was just a blessing. And the only reason that I got to go is my wife, Tani, usually is James's kind of yoga teacher for the trip, and she was getting her degree. So I got to go in her place. And so, of course, I said, sure, I'd love to go hang out with my friend James in India, stay at these nice hotels, stay, a week at this Ayurvedic spa that is, like James said, it's magical. On the beach, beautiful rooms, beautiful doctors, beautiful people, beautiful food. What could go wrong, And so, and then the journeys, the excursions that we went on from there. I've been to a couple of them, Taj Mahal I've been to before, but it's so amazing to just go back to places that you've been in India and just see how it's different but the same. And that was my whole experience there. Like, there's such a culture there of a connection to gods, connection to the spiritual life, and how it manifests in this now modern country of India. So I came home feeling fantastic, and surprisingly rested. I literally hit the ground running when I got back and was off to teach to a retreat of my own. And I don't know, the people that that have this call to go to India, if you've not been before, it's kind of nice to align yourself with James' company, Savanti Adventures, that have been doing it for a long time and have created a culture and a community of people on the ground in India that you have open access to. And when I compare it to my earlier trips to India, I literally was stumbling down streets trying to figure out where I was, and then experiences would happen for me, or, you know, and many of them were good, but some of them weren't so good. So, and this was just a true relaxing kind of experience of India.
I
And
can relate, Peter. The first year I was there in India in '89, um, we were staying in $2 a night guest houses with, rats running around. And, we would get to train stations, and the train, we're on time, but they were like, no, that train left 20 minutes ago. The next train will be tomorrow morning, like 12 hours later. So we'd sleep on the cement floor. We had we're on a really young person's budget.
right.
Um, but that was a time, that was what you do when you're 25 years old. And, now I'm 62, so I'm not really interested in sleeping on cement floors anymore. And, I'd rather have a nice 4.5 star, 5-star hotel and, be able to go out and experience India, even rickshaw rides through Varanasi, which are like really chaotic and thrilling and adrenaline rush, but then come back to your hotel and have some clean food and, a nice modern, comfortable bed, and just be able to recover yourself and then go back out again for another outing. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
that sounds really nice. You know what I really like about everything that I'm hearing, James, and I want to ask you about how you still practice, but I really love how you take people to the experts instead of trying to become the expert yourself, which I'm sure you have become an expert in your own way, just, by experience, time, and gathering knowledge. But I love that you're like, oh, I found this expert over here. Come with me to go meet them instead of trying to take what you've learned and
Yeah, I don't make my travel tours about me. I mean, I obviously am the organizer and I am the master guide, if you want to call it that. Done it many times, but I partner with really good people, very experienced people, local people. So I don't want to speak for Indian culture or even for Indian spirituality. I've never considered myself to be a voice for them. I'm more of a bridge, and I bring people there, and then I let the experience unfold for each person. If I'm there if they need help, and they feel really secure knowing that they're with somebody who has the kind of experience that I do, but I'm not the center of attention. Like the center of attention is what you're experiencing of the culture while you're there. That should be the front and center, is what you are actually experiencing. Not like, oh, go to India with James. He's amazing. And it's all about James. My ego is not that much into it. It's What's beautiful is right over there. You see that temple right there, or do you see that puja that's happening over here? Watch that. That's what's really interesting about this space. It's not me.
And why did you choose India over Africa? I mean, I know you mentioned that you got into yoga because of your relationship, but yeah. Hey, quick note. Peter's Inner Teacher Academy is launching soon. If this is resonating with you, head over to innerteacheracademy.com and grab a spot on the wait list. These trainings are intimate and space is limited. So if you want to be first in line, tap the link in the description below and sign up.
You can also see details about my 2025 retreats at some incredible locations around the world, like Iceland, Austria, California, and New Zealand. Attendance at these trainings will count towards in-person hours for the Inner Teacher Academy. And now let's get back to the magic.
I think because my first wife was a very well-known yoga teacher. I was not the yoga teacher. My sort of role was to be more of the Ayurvedic doctor, acupuncture sort of healer, and that those two together really worked well for us as a partnership for as long as it did. So it was never we went to India and lived there for a year, so I had that experience, and then we went back and started with led retreats. So I just found, I do think about that sometimes. Like, why don't I organize a tour to Africa? I do have that kind of deep connection to it. But I think that being immersed in the yoga community, there's that natural curiosity about what India is. So I think my tours are really for the American yoga community who want to go back to see where this comes from, the mother of this great practice that they have. And Africa just sort of seems like it's not quite in the community or part of the community that I'm in all the time.
Yeah, I would say that's also this skill that you have, James, with understanding as a yogi, because you had a very strong, when you were younger, I've experienced, I shared space with you in a yoga class at Yoga Works, that was part of who you were as well. And I don't meet many Ayurvedic practitioners that actually do yoga, which is kind of ironic. Other than just, go to a yoga class every now and then. But I think what you offer people that are interested in India is this deep background in Ayurveda, but also a respect of the practice of yoga and finding, teachers like my wife, and then for me this year, teachers that also share that same love of yoga and can offer that on your tours. Like it's not just hotel yoga, it's like quality yoga that you get on this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I brought you. Yeah.
Well, my wife too.
And
She,
of course, yeah, and
yeah,
Tani.
yeah.
I'm not a yoga teacher. I've practiced Ashtanga yoga every day for 11 years back starting in 87, and then heavily into Vinyasa flow type systems and studied at the Bihar School of Yoga for a period of time. But I don't advocate. I don't pretend to be a yoga teacher. I know who I am, and I'm well practiced, but I'm not a teacher. So I need you or Tani to kind of do that and fill that role. And it just works to have someone who's reputable and respected and revered to be in that role. I don't need to fill every role that I have.
No, of course. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. No, I am now aware of what a wonderful thing that retreat is. And yeah, I don't know what the future holds. If I get invited to go back as a teacher, man, I'm the first person to sign up.
You and your wife are going to have to do a little Rochambeau.
Exactly. So James, I'm curious now with Savanti Institute, like again, this role that you play as an educator. What at what point did you think, okay, there's something missing, or there's something that I feel I have that feel confident to start offering these kinds of programs? Tell me how that came about.
Well, it started after my divorce, actually, which I can share with you was a pretty traumatic and very difficult time in my life. But at the same time, it really brought out a lot of growth from me, because it really forced me to really reinvigorate myself and kind of rediscover myself in a way that I didn't see coming. When you see loss, when you grieve, and you just feel like everything's gone and down to that dark, deep bottom of life, you can't imagine that there's something beautiful on the other side of that. And the beauty that was there was really reinventing myself, rediscovering myself. That brought out a certain power in my teaching that I didn't have while I was married, because I was part of a shared type of teaching situation. So, there were a few years of teaching workshops at different yoga schools around the country, and I really enjoyed that. But by 2014, 15, were asking me to teach more intensive programs on Ayurveda. They wanted more. I was a little hesitant at first because I wasn't sure I wanted to become identified as the Ayurveda teacher to the yoga schools. I like teaching several other topics also, like yoga psychology, and I didn't want to be limited. But the way this work goes, you have to be nimble and pivot and kind of go with where the demand is, and also fulfill needs. Like that's what they want, then you have to be available for that. It's also how you take care of yourself and your family. So I started teaching. I put together a 12-day program that was called the Ayurveda Wellness Counselor Program. And it was initially designed for yoga teachers, which is interesting because I saw at the time when I was traveling all over the country, I was on faculty at about 20 different yoga schools, that yoga teachers were consistently giving health advice and nutritional advice based on what was working for them. And they weren't following kind of like some of the basic rules of healing, particularly in Ayurvedic medicine, that each person's a unique person and should be assessed individually and given very unique remedies to what's going on with them. Diet should be completely unique to them. Lifestyle changes should be unique to them. Herbal therapy is unique to them, and so on. Hold on a second. They were just sort of cookie cuttering and giving people like these basic, like, well, I'm a vegetarian, or I'm a vegan, or I'm a paleo, or I'm a keto, or whatever, and people were not doing well because they were following someone else's model of what got them to be. And they were healthy. The teachers were healthy, but that doesn't mean other people will be healthy doing what you're doing. So I just saw this huge mess, and I thought, well, what if I just taught like a 12-day program, not a 3-year training, just like a 12-day program, give yoga teachers some certification that they know a little bit about Ayurveda, and actually teach them how to do a real basic intake on the doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha, and how to know what their constitution was, really basic. And so it took off, and it went really well. It just kind of blew up. And then the next thing you know, 2 years later, the National Ayurvedic Medical Association that certifies people, they saw it, and they created their own certification level called the Ayurvedic Health Counselor, which was modeled after my program. But the difference was that they wanted the grads to have at least 650 hours of training, and mine was 120. So I had to oh my gosh, they just one up me on my concept. So now I have to up myself. And so I had to bring in all these teachers. In 2018, I brought in 12 more teachers to teach what I call the level 2 program. And then I taught a level 3 program, which was the clinical supervision program. But I couldn't afford to bring all 12 of these teachers to every yoga studio around the country, right? It's just like hotels, flights. It was like there was no way. So I was told at that time, have you ever heard of Zoom? I was like, no, what's Zoom? And one of my teachers said, we just have them video conference. I was like, what's video conferencing? He said, well, they stay at home and all the students stay at home and they can take courses and no one has to travel anywhere. And I was like, oh my God, that's perfect. So for the first 2 years, I had to train every student how to use Zoom. I had to train my teachers how to use Zoom. And then, of course, in 2020, the pandemic hit and everybody became a Zoom expert. So it's actually good for us because I didn't have to train people on how to do it. So that's kind of how it started. It really started as a simple model to help teach this concept of authenticity to yoga teachers so that when they teach yoga and when they share health information with their students, that they were really honoring the individuality of the person that they were working with, right? So they weren't telling a vata type to eat like a vegan, which is a really bad idea because
Yes, thank you.
they
Someone
run
told
a
me
little
that.
bit too anemic as it is, and a little under their tissues are a little less nourished, and they're very more sensitive and more frail, and they need deeper nourishment. They need a little bit more heavier foods. So
Yes.
yeah, just it's all about being true to the individual that they're talking to.
And the inner teacher, which is what we're here talking about. I mean, it's the perfect nutritional methodology science for following your inner teacher, because you have to know, I mean, the dosha, what I love about the dosha, I studied a little bit of Ayurveda, like just a little bit. And I love how you have a dosha when you're born, and then it changes over time. And then there's, you can have imbalances in the mind, you can have imbalances in the body, you can have imbalances in your emotions, right? So it's so complex in many different layers.
Right. So everybody is born with what's called a prakriti, or your constitution or your nature. And it's the balance of the 3 doshas. Like I'm high pitta, secondarily high vata, and low kapha by nature. That just means if my doshas are in those sort of range points, everything's going to fall into place and I'm going to be really healthy. But but the doshas are actually quite dynamic, so they can be aggravated, right? All 3 of them. And if they aggravate, that's called vikriti, or that's disease or disorder, imbalance. So what doesn't change is the prakriti. But the doshas are actually kind of fluctuating, reacting to the foods you've eaten, the stress levels, how much sleep you got. They're always kind of moving. But if you can keep them kind of within a certain range, like this, which is Prakriti, then they're healthy. And if this one's where it should be, and this is where it should be. So that's how we teach it. But if you give someone a nutritional plan that's doing well for you and they have a different Prakriti, then you can push a dosha out of balance and it will leave its balance point and create symptomology and discomfort and symptoms. So it's really important that you assess the person carefully before you give them recommendations.
Peter, do you know your dosha? Your prakriti?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 99.9% pitta and a little bit of kapha. But that was partly true, but partly not. When I'm balanced, like when I feel like I'm living my life in balance, I'm about 50-50 kapha and pitta. Occasionally the kapha drops and the air, vata comes up a little bit. If I'm overcommitted, if I'm feeling that I've committed to too many things, I get a little bit vata-y. But I feel blessed, grateful that I'm a lot of pitta because it frees me up diet-wise. I can eat just about anything and be okay. So I used to really watch what I eat in terms of, food combinations and blah, 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 but not so much anymore. Now I like I may have mentioned before, it's important that I find where the source of my food is coming from. And then I pretty much eat anything, with the
Yeah.
exception of some kind of non-negotiables like white sugar. White sugar, I kind of avoid.
Yeah. I've stopped white sugar thanks to you. Thank you.
Oh, how do you
It's been,
feel?
you know, I don't notice that much of a difference except for I don't crash anymore. I don't crash, which I like. James, I wanted to ask you, do you have like a place on your website or where do you go like for someone watching that's like, what's a dosha? And I want to know mine. Is there a place online?
No, we don't offer online kind of tests for assessing people's Prakritis because well, first of all, that's very limited and it's very fraught with potential errors. And if you make an error in doing that, and then you take that information and go buy herbs or foods and do it incorrectly, you can do more harm than good. So what you can do is you can, if you want to go and book one of our Ayurvedic practitioners on our website, then you can get an actual assessment and an intake from someone live. You can do it online. We just built out a new platform called Savanti Wellness. And Savanti Wellness is really, mostly it's designed to be what we call a practitioner development community, where we're helping people who are coming out of programs like out of Ayurvedic training programs, but we also support yoga therapists and Jyotish practitioners to help them build their practices and build sort of mastery over what they do. But there is a wing to it called Savanti Practice. If you go to Savanti Wellness and click on the little link to Savanti Practice, that's the booking platform where you can hire practitioners to do a session for you.
So, James, I'm curious about that because I've thought about doing it myself. The intake is one session, but then at the end of one session, what is the follow through? What does it look like with the follow through?
It really depends on each person. We don't have a formula for it. So there are some people who are coming in and they're pretty healthy and they just want some help with nutrition, like to give me some, direction in nutrition, and you may not need to see them again at all. Others might come in and say, I've got MS, multiple sclerosis, and I need some help. And that's going to be a situation where you need to do the intake, give them a report, give them direction, and then maybe check in on them every month or so or every couple of weeks, just to make sure that they're integrating some of the recommendations. Or if there are practices like Abhyanga or Nasya and so on that they need actual instruction on how to do them,
Right.
you might need to have follow-up sessions. Or if they need to do a cleanse, that might require a whole follow-up. So it depends on how imbalanced the person is.
Yeah, and this how does that work online? Like, for instance, if the follow-up, then they would have to, if they needed some oil treatments like Abhyanga, they would need to find someone local to their area.
No, we don't. We don't. We teach our patients or clients how to do the practices for themselves.
Wow.
So one of the most important elements in how I work and how I've created these platforms is that if we're really honest with ourselves, I don't heal anybody, right? Doctors don't heal anybody. A chiropractor never healed. No one heals anybody. You can only heal yourself, right? So the role of the physician or the Ayurvedic practitioner doctor or the acupuncturist or the chiropractor or anything is really just to help steer the body towards balance, but it has to be reinforced by exercise, changes in lifestyle, and changes in diet, right? So ultimately, what we do is we assess people, we teach them about their nature and about the nature of their imbalances, and then we give them remedies to bring that imbalance back into a state of stability, and then we give them guidance on how to maintain that. But because at the end of the day, a chiropractor adjusts someone's spine, or if an acupuncture, regulates the flow of chi, or a yoga teacher even alters, energy in the body. If you don't maintain that, it just goes right back to where it was before they saw you. So any kind of so-called medical work is really temporary. The actual healing has to be done by the individual.
Right.
With the guidance of us. So you can do that online. You can do it through video conferencing. You can do it in person, whichever you want.
Right. Yeah, that's so true in yoga too. Like going to do a yoga class, it helps in the short term, but what really kind of transforms using yoga as a practice is regular practice, and especially home practice.
Right.
It's really what I've created with the Inner Teacher Academy is this shift away from another yoga style and more towards turning the authority back to
Yes.
accessing the inner teacher that self-corrects, diagnoses, so to speak, of the imbalance. And if they need resources, then they take a class or they come out to you and create some kind of protocol for them to follow with herbs or oil or etc.
Yeah. And Peter, we've been having this conversation for years, about how to teach people not just to become a carbon copy of you as a teacher, and how to teach people to really listen to themselves, to be authentic as a teacher, which is really the inner teacher kind of concept. I think you've been formulating this for decades now.
Decades. Yeah, and to be honest, James, I'm going to give you credit. I don't know how long ago it was, but it's probably been 15, 20 years now, that a conversation I had with you in Santa Monica when I was down for something, and where we were just lamenting the proliferation of yoga styles, hot vinyasa power yoga, whatever it's called, there's these Western marketing trying to come up with something unique.
I'm laughing because that's how I started. Hot power vinyasa yoga.
Yeah, some niche market, and really the idea of a training that focused on intuition, on this idea of inner teacher, and also one that wasn't so serious. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I floated the idea to you about using the word levity to describe what I teach, and you said fantastic. Like, that's the perfect word for what you teach. You remember that conversation? Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for leading me in both these directions. The levity yoga is a perfect thing because just seriousness in yoga is overrated. It's like lightheartedness and
Yeah.
what I've often said is that the part of the brain that humor resides in is the same part of the brain where intuition resides, and where this kind of synthesis of union between the hemispheres of the brain operates. And of course, is there a style of yoga that helps students come to that understanding? I don't know that many. That's what my goal as a teacher is to kind of, and I used to joke about this. My voice in a yoga class should be like Muzak in an elevator. Like, you recognize that it's music, kind of, but you're not really paying attention to it. It's just background noise, and you're conscious of movement inside a box, To me, that's kind of what I'm doing,
I think
teaching
it's
yoga.
also about how the way you teach is because Peter and I did a lot of trainings together, and so we did sit in on each other's, teaching components quite a bit. And what I pick up, Peter, is that from our conversations is when people are learning to become a teacher, at first you have to take in the external teacher. You have to listen to Peter, or you have to listen to James, you have to listen to whoever your teacher is, and then you hope to like be able to remember what they said and regurgitate what they said. And so at first it does come out sounding like Peter, like I'm another Peter Stereos teaching Peter Stereos' yoga. But over time, I mean, with the proper blessings and the proper encouragement and some mentorships, it's like, no, you need to eventually over time drop in more and more of what is Peter and become more and more of what is you as a teacher. And you are allowed and expected to teach from your own voice and to be yourself. Because if you think about it, yoga and Ayurveda both kind of share this common Vedic principle called sadvrita, which means knowledge of truth, right? So living true to yourself. And so the only way we can grow from yoga is if the yoga that we practice and the yoga that we need is specific or exact to what we need to actually grow or what's limiting us in life. Just doing someone else's yoga isn't enough. It's just, okay, I'm practicing what they did to become healthier and more self-aware or self-actualized, right? But what about me?
Yeah.
So all these limbs in yoga, like the 8 limbs in yoga, the Ashtanga, these are just tools. And these tools, there's two sides to these tools. One is the actual technique that's involved, but then the other side is how are they relevant in real life? What do
Right.
they actually get? How do I grow from this tool? And if I don't need this tool, I really shouldn't be doing that limb, right? I'm good in that limb. But if I'm suppressed or limited or insecure or struggle with mental health or physical health, there might be other limbs that are more really important for me to focus on. And so it does all come down at the end of the day to the individualization of the person that is practicing, right? So your style kind of frees people as a teacher to be themselves and to find their voice. And I think that will translate to students receiving more of what they need in
Yeah.
life and not just a cookie cup.
And even if you're
Yeah.
not a teacher, because there's a lot of people who do teacher trainings, they spend a lot of money and they spend a lot of hours learning a lot of stuff that it's useful, but they don't like all they're looking to do is guide themselves because they don't know what to do. They've got the mat there and they feel like they need someone to guide them. But
Yeah.
like, the Inner Teacher Academy is also for people who don't necessarily want to be teachers, but they want to be able to have a home practice where they can guide themselves, right?
Yeah, I want to address this too. Thank you for bringing it up. For years, I'm doing these teacher trainings, decades really, and of the number of graduates I've produced, I would say less than 5% of them are actually teaching yoga. Now, why is that a reflection of me? No, it's not. It's a reflection of people that were there just because there was no other product on the yoga marketplace for them advancing because the neighborhood class that they go to weekly or biweekly doesn't usually dive into the richness and diversity of what yoga really is. So this concept evolved for me from the realization that there are just a few key principles that I want to give students to empower their own inner dialogue with their self practice. And these principles evolved into 3, which is back body breathing, spine mechanics, and fundamentals of flow. Those are just labels that I've put onto these concepts, let's call it, of how to choreograph a practice for yourself, how to assess, like a doctor's assessment of your own body for practice of yoga. How do you assess, okay, today I woke up, oh, I'm stiff in this shoulder, or I'm feeling weak in this right knee. My right knee was injured in the past. So you're dealing with these kind of ever-changing imbalances in your body where one style of yoga practice may or may not be appropriate for a weak knee or an overused shoulder, whatever it is. So over time now, I've been teaching this way for 15 years. the ability for students to self-assess how to set up a practice using these three practice principles have been very successful. Like I get immediate feedback from students getting back to me saying, wow, I not that torn. This happened not too long ago. He'd torn his hamstring 20 years ago, and he'd worked with a torn hamstring, the soreness, for years in yoga with no resolution. It was always there. It was always hard for him. He stopped running, the thing that he loves doing. And when he met me 10 years ago or so, he started practicing with this idea of softness and letting gravity initiate movement. And within a year, he sent me an email saying, "Oh my God, I'm running again, and it feels fantastic. And I'm doing things that I never thought I could do. And I haven't had any symptoms of this torn hamstring since." That to me is, as a teacher, very validating that. And for those of you that are out there listening, if the yoga teachers that you've studied with up to this point aren't somehow pointing in the direction of self-authority, you may want to explore other teachers that are there. I'm not the only one that are moving you towards this idea of self-authority in terms of how you choreograph a practice and how you decide one day from the next, well, what is my body really asking me for right now? And to be honest, some days it's rest. Okay, even in Ashtanga, once a week, they have a day of rest. I mean, the worst thing that ever happened to the Western mindset for yoga is unlimited yoga passes because they want to get their money's worth. I was this person, like in the early days, oh man, unlimited pass, I can do yoga every day. Well, that may not be the best thing for you as your body ebbs and flows.
Yep. Yep. I had my first office, acupuncture and Ayurveda office, right across the street from Yoga Works in Santa Monica. And I had a little saying, "You break them, I fix them." That
That's
Did you have
great.
that up on the wall?
Not literally, because a lot of the teachers came over, and if I did that, they would tell Chuck and Mati, and they would not have been pleased with that. So
No, okay.
it was an unsaid motto that I had. But.
No, it's funny.
I have a question for you, James. There's this last question that I sent you, and I really like it. Looking back on your 30-year journey, what have you learned about the relationship between the inner teacher and authentic healing that you wish you had known when you started?
I think I would have liked to have known that it's okay to listen to others, but to trust yourself and trust the inner teacher. I think when you're young or starting out on any kind of healing journey, there's a lot of energy or time put into listening to others, to seeking out the voices of other people. And I feel like the inner teacher kind of teaches in drips, right? It drips in like nectar, unless you're suffering a lot, in which case the teachings come as a flood, right? Like that's one of the things that's beautiful about life, and even beautiful about struggle and about suffering, is that the more we suffer, the more the volume of information, of the loudness of the inner teacher becomes louder and stronger, if you're willing to listen and hear that, right? So, we're all imperfectly perfect, which gives us room for growth. We're all flawed in our own way. There is no state of perfection. In Ayurveda, we talk about this concept of prakriti, but it's our true nature. But you're never there perfectly all the time. You're always sort of like falling out of balance and falling out of balance and falling out of balance. And you spend moments there in balance, or maybe a day or two, and then the next little imbalance occurs. So don't judge yourself, too harshly. Don't judge others at all, because they're all battling their battles too, and their inner teachers teaching them. And just be compassionate and just know that each of us is unique and one of a kind, and never to lose yourself, never to lose that sense of you-ness. Just keep being true to yourself.
Thank
Well
you.
said. Well said. That feels like a nice place to kind of close.
Yeah.
James, it's just a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah. Anytime.
It was a pleasure being with you in India. I I have this sense that next year, there's going to be this a little bit of sadness as take my wife to the airport to go spend time in India. But I've got space for that, and I just love what you're doing. I really wish you well.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Thank you, Crystal. It was great to spend time with you guys.
Yes, thank you.
That's it for this episode. Be well and stay open to the teacher within. If you've enjoyed our time together, follow or subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming chats you don't want to miss.